Welcome to everybody. My name is Dara Ryder. I'm CEO of AHEAD. AHEAD is an independent NGO focused on creating inclusive environments in education and employment for people with disabilities. But today we're focused on talking about UDL, which of course is a framework that benefits all learners and helps us to build more flexibility, more accessibility, more learner voice and choice into our FET programs. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you require closed captions for today, our wonderful captioner Michelle is with us providing those captions, and you can get that by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window, and that just produces a live transcript for you, everything that we're saying here today. The session is also being recorded and will be sent to all participants via email after the session once we've had a chance to download it and caption it. So if you bear with us for a few days after the event, you will receive that link to the recording. If you want to interact with each other today and to comment on the session, you can do so in the chat box. So be sure to make sure that your chat function is set when you're sending message to send to all participants and attendees. That's a little sort of filter that's right above where you type in your message. Otherwise, the panelists will only see it. So in other words, if you want all attendees to be able to see your comment, make sure that all panelists and attendees is selected there. If you'd like to ask a question of the panelists here today, please put it in the Q&A box. So there's two different boxes. One is chat, that's for you and the participants to share links and ideas and comments. But if you have a specific question, you can put that in the Q&A box, and that's where we'll pose a question to the panelists here today. So I'll be monitoring that closely in terms of the questions that come in, and I'll be interrupting the guys during the session at appropriate times, or if the question is more suited to the Q&A at the end, I'll hold on then. You can also, if you prefer to come on to the microphone and to verbally comment or ask a question, you can use the raise hand function. And that means we can allow you to use your microphone. But otherwise, please avoid raising your digital hand, because we'll assume you want to speak in the session and pause it accordingly. It should be noted that if you do comment verbally, your audio will feature in the publicly shared video of this session. So by raising your hand, you're considered to be giving consent to that. So just bear that in mind as well. With me today from the AHEAD crew is Trevor Boland, who's working in the background to monitor the chat and also to post occasional links that are relevant to the content. And Jess is with us today, who's organised this event for us. So a big thanks to both of them. And lastly, before we start, I want to say a huge thank you to Solus and to ETBI, who co-commissioned AHEAD to undertake the UDL for FET project, and in particular to the wonderful learner support team in Solus, who continues to support AHEAD's core activities around fostering inclusion in FET, without whom today's session just wouldn't be possible. So I think we're almost ready to get started. So the UDL for FET Practitioners guidance, which will be discussed in the session today, is really, really close to my heart, having been involved throughout the process of its development. So I'm really delighted to be joined today by the wonderful Dr. Tom Tobin, who's a US UDL expert and author, and the inimitable Heelan, who's an amazing UDL advocate and the former executive director of AHEAD. So they are both the key authors of the UDL for FET Practitioners guidance. And later in the session, we'll also hear from FET practitioners Carrie Archer and Helena Farrell, who will share their stories of UDL implementation in the guidance. So Tom and Anne, how are you both? It's lovely to be delivering a session about this guidance and the resource hub, which are now, of course, fully available after a long time developing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's brilliant. I'm so glad to get it out there and people have it for the start of the new term.
Absolutely, and we're grateful to get things kicked off. In fact, Anne, why don't you get it formally going?
Okay, hi everybody. Dara's already introduced me. I'm Anne Heelan, and today we're having a town hall style webinar where we're celebrating the brand new and freely available new book called Universal Design for FET Practitioners, Guidance for Implementing Universal Design for Learning for the Irish Further Education and Training Sector. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but it is basically a book of guidance because UDL is a very hot topic at the moment, and not just now, but it's here to stay. It is one of the strategic pillars of Solus, and our goal today is to give you, our colleagues across the FET sector, ways to go beyond the sort of add-on individual accommodations for people with disabilities into what is kind of real inclusion for all learners. And we're using the UDL framework to do that. So this session is, as Dara's already mentioned, meant to be interactive and collaborative. So you will have many opportunities, as he's already described, to share your voice with us and your experience and your ideas, particularly around including the diversity of learner in the classroom, reducing the need for those add-on accommodations, improving learner outcomes such as, active learning, persistence, autonomous learning, satisfaction of the learner. And then also we'll hear about you, tell us about how you have nurtured and developed professional learning networks, which will help you and your colleagues to grow your universal design practices. So I think Dara's already also made a big thanks to Solus and ETB, because we need to acknowledge their huge contribution and of the many groups who have inputted into this guidance. We didn't do it on our own, obviously, with collaborating with the sector, particularly with the National Advisory Committee for Universal Design, which was made up of a broad representation, for example, from ETBI, Solus, guidance counsellors, principals, the Department of Education, QQI, amongst many others. And also, most importantly, the practitioners out there in the sector on the ground who have shared their stories with us, their experiences, and have worked with us to create this book, which we couldn't have possibly done without them. So the UDL for FET Practitioners was officially launched on the 14th of June this year, and we are very grateful to everybody who was involved, who sponsored or contributed or shaped it along the way. So thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Anne. And before we dive into the guidance, on your screen, there's an image of somebody working on a laptop, and they've also got their phone out, and there's a notebook and a pad of paper there. And let's do a little brainstorming about universal design for learning. UDL is all about lowering barriers for engagement, access to information, and taking action and expressing knowledge. We all recently went through an experience where we all had the same barrier. It was social distancing due to the global pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, what's one interaction that you typically have with your FET learners that either just stopped or got more challenging to do? We'll put 2 minutes on the clock. Use that time to take notes privately and just keep them for yourself. Share your response in the chat feature, or wait until the end of the time and use that raise hand feature if you'd like to come on the microphone and share. For GDPR compliance, we should say that using the microphone gives us permission to feature you in the recording of the session. Now, you'll hear music during this thinking time, and we'll signal in the chat when the music is ending. So here's 2 minutes worth of music, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. What's one thing that was a pandemic pinch for you, something that didn't go the way you wanted it to go or just stopped? And that was 2 minutes. It goes by really quickly when you're thinking. So thank you, everybody, for your thoughts. I see a lot of folks are keying things into the chat right now. We'll get to those in a second. I want to check in with Trevor and Jess. Are there folks behind the scenes who have put a hand up to come onto the live microphone?
I can't see any hands just yet, but absolutely take your time, everyone. And if you have an opportunity or a thought that you want to say out loud, yeah, you're more than welcome.
And Trevor is actually pointing to one part of Universal Design for Learning that you can implement right away, and that is giving people choices about how they share information. Even if none of you choose to be on the live microphone at all in this webinar session, just having the choice means that we hope you will feel more empowered to take some notes for yourself or be part of the chat. And we've got a whole bunch of things in the chat. Let me take a look and see. We've got Charles talking about coffee time for informal learning, so missing those face-to-face things. Paul also says missing face-to-face things. Ailing says all of our activities required twice as much planning and only about half of the participants wanted to be involved. That is a challenge as well. Carrie says it's more difficult to build relationships if you're meeting for the first time virtually as opposed to face-to-face, so there's something to be said for that. Dara says for ahead, we found it really tough to get engaging conversations going among event participants online, at least at first. There, we don't have that problem in this session. People are coming right in. Martina says spontaneous discussion. Claire talks about interactions, had to use Jamboard, which was more difficult than discussing or using a face-to-face whiteboard. Barry talks about the move from face-to-face appointments to telephone and online engagements. Class discussion, physically meeting people face-to-face, hearing all of their voices, keeping engagement with learners, encouraging participation in live classes for folks who might not be confident. Difficult to build rapport over the internet with new groups. Elizabeth says finding ways to keep everyone engaged on Zoom, kind of like what we're doing now. And we've got a lot of other comments in here. One-to-one help, not being able to meet people informally. Having to think out every single thing for planning, curation, and creation. And meeting learners one-to-one is very important to reassure them, support group work, and focus on key learning needs. I see a lot of different themes coming together here. And thank you, everybody, for doing a little thinking with us as we get started. So now, given all of those barriers, imagine the sorts of barriers that exist for your learners even when there isn't a lockdown going on. Things like work or family and caring responsibilities, language learning needs, socioeconomic challenges, access to technology and internet, and disability barriers in their environments. The main reason that we created the UDL for FET Practitioners guidelines was to help shift our collective work away from time-intensive, one-to-one individual support wherever that's possible, and adopt practices that help lower barriers for a wide range of learners. This lessens our own workloads and frees up time and resources for learners who have those most pressing individual accommodation needs.
Okay, yes, I think we all miss the one-on-one, being able to talk to somebody else, and hopefully that's all coming to an end now that we're all jabbed several times. But FET is such a broad format. I mean, it goes from part-time community work to youth reach to PLC, right up to apprentices from level 3 to level 6. And many ETBs are adopting or have adopted UDL as a high quality teaching and learning approach. And for example, you see here on the screen that Limerick and Clare on their website have adopted UDL as a means of promoting. They see it as the key to inclusion, to increase access to equal opportunities within the mainstream teaching environment. So that's just fantastic. And I mean, I think we've got many examples. I think Cork of ETB has also been promoting universal design for their teaching staff and have set up inclusion networks so that staff can share their ideas, their new approaches, you know, how they've found solutions to challenges. So yeah, it's learning what works, how UDL can improve the mainstream learning environment. And I suppose the beauty about UDL is it's not prescriptive. It works across all of those diverse programs because it doesn't tell people what to do or how to do it. It's a framework that offers flexibility and a really good way to include the diversity of learner. Tom?
Thank you, Anne. And not all of our FET learners fit into the traditional teaching and learning model, right? So some have learning difficulties, language problems, different abilities. They come from different cultural backgrounds. Educators, we all want to support them to do their best. So on your screen are a number of ways that we can apply universal design for learning principles, offering students options to act on what they know, providing access to tools that support how they express their learning, offering choice in how they demonstrate their learning, offering students different ways to understand content, and supporting them in their activities to plan tasks and set goals. UDL gives learners more ways to understand the content, more choice in how to show what they know, and more tools to support their learning. And it's all about, you've probably heard the 3 different levels of universal design for learning: multiple means of engagement, representation, and then action and expression. As a starting point, UDL can also be approached through +1 thinking. And we did a good bit of this in the brainstorming, where there's one way for an interaction to happen now. Add one more way.
So UDL is a concept, and I know Tom has been explaining how it works, and this is all included in the guidelines. But in fact, when we went out there talking to people about putting this together, there was a certain amount of confusion about it, because I think it can mean different things to different people. It is a concept. So I think part of putting this guidance together was to give people some form of common understanding of what UDL is, and to give them some sort of definitions of it, so that there is greater consistency, I suppose, across the whole sector. And we can see from the foreword to the book how committed the sector is to ensuring that all of its learners get access to opportunities to the best learning available. So we also knew, I think, that inclusion was not new to FET. There were plenty of brilliant examples of inclusion across every program and every ETB. And, you know, this, particularly things like brilliant relationships with their learners, flexible learning using IT. So we decided to build on that and to use that, what the practices that were already in existence. So we worked in collaboration with our FET colleagues, with SOLAS, with ETBI, to create this very practical how-to guide for you as practitioners. And we'll give you now a look at how we went about creating it. So, and we'll talk about the ideas in it that you can use to create a more inclusive and broader learning environment within your institution.
And we wanted robust and authentic feedback from the sector. On your screen, you see some participants in one of the listening sessions that we did a couple of years back. We wanted to gauge everybody's feelings, their frustrations, their hopes for the future. We listened to everyone. Over several years, we presented to directors, held a national World Cafe seminar with disability officers, counselors, teachers, principals, made 8 different site visits across Ireland, and talked to individual practitioners who are working in the classroom and in support roles. Then we communicated to the FET sector, sending out invitations to events on the UDL framework.
So we took a very problem-based approach, structuring the document around the very real-life stories that we received from the FET practitioners on the ground. People who are out there dealing, as you see, with a variety of needs that different learners might have. I mean, in any one session, you might get a learner who wanted to attend just to write a letter, and another person might want to actually learn quite sophisticated work-based learning. So, you know, there's a great diversity of what people needed, and this is a challenge. And we wanted to capture how people, practitioners, teachers, and others across the sector were actually what they were doing and how they were applying the various UDL principles that Tom's already described. For example, such as the maths teacher who used an app for Arabic translation app to make sure that one of his learners in particular could follow the who used a community garden project to create multiple ways for her students to engage with, encounter, and demonstrate their mastery of ordinary everyday calculation skills. So we captured the experience of teachers who made small changes that made a huge difference to their learners. Practitioners who read the early draft of this guidance were very thankful that it wasn't just a list of, oh, you must do this, you must do that, but that the learning came through from the stories of people that they actually knew.
And like Anne is talking about, the concepts in UDL are, if we apply them fully, a lot of work. So to help practitioners in this guidance, the principles of UDL are introduced only after examples of how to start small. There's an example on your screen. And then an incremental, iterative, one-at-a-time approach is consistently shown in all of the examples, problems, and narratives throughout the guidance. So let's build on that pinch point that you identified in our opening brainstorming session and work through one of the exercises from the UDL for FET Practitioners book. Using that pinch point that you identified earlier, think of just one more way that you could encourage your learners to get started or stick with it, or one more way that learners could encounter the ideas and information that they need, or one more way that they could show what they know. And on your screen is one of the exercises from the book. Put together a list of materials and information for +1 format alternatives. But think about that challenge that you identified earlier, and what's one more way? We'll put 2 more minutes on the clock. As usual, you can use that time to take notes privately for yourself, share your response in the chat feature, or wait until the end of the time and use that raise hand feature at the end to come on the microphone. We'll also signal in the chat when the time is running out, but here's 2 minutes. And regardless of whether you're using technology or distance, or you want to do something face-to-face, what's one more way that those interactions and communications can happen? So here's 2 minutes for thinking, and we'll come back in a bit. Now, so far in the chat, I'm seeing fewer ideas coming in, but people are still thinking and typing, and 2 minutes is not a lot of time, but this is just a 1-hour session, and we'll have lots of open time for Q&A at the end as well. Before we go into the chat, let me check in with Trevor and Jess to see if we have anybody with a hand up who'd like to come on the live microphone and share an idea.
Not just yet, but I'm scanning all the time, so I'm keeping an eye out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Jess. In the chat, we've got some really good ideas here. Marion saying using videos like screencasts in addition to course notes, and give learners options for using notes or videos. So that's a +1 in terms of format. Shane is talking about podcasting. Sharon says doing e-zines or PowerPoints and videos with captions instead of just emails to students. Dara says get students engaged in intro sessions, invite each of them to share what they want to get out of the course on camera or via the chat. Rebecca says PowerPoint with voiceover or video and audio table for assessment. So giving students options for how they show their skills to you as the instructor. Shane's talking about Menti or Padlet. Those are tools that don't require a lot of extra stuff, and they're pretty mobile friendly as well for those of your students who are using mobile devices, not just remotely too, but also in the classroom as well. Did I see a hand go up there for a couple of seconds? It must have been quick. Okay, no worries.
Yeah,
Barry's
there's one. Paul Patton raised his hand.
Hey, Paul. Trevor, can we give Paul the microphone real quick?
Absolutely. I think, Paul, are you on mute?
I think I'm unmuted, am I?
We can hear you. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Okay. I just think one essential aspect of implementing UDL is the ability to record classes if we were able to get the cooperation of staff and especially unions, you know, because that's one response we had back from learners during the COVID-19. They found it very beneficial to be able to go back on recorded classes.
Yep, and Paul, I'm going to add one thing to what you're talking about. Recording lectures and then posting them on YouTube or in your learning management system or somewhere where students can get at them. It's not only beneficial that they can rewind us and go back, but also if you have captions for those, even if they're the automated captions that YouTube does, which are not great, but they're better than nothing, that means that your videos become searchable. Oh, my professor was talking about quadratic equations in my maths class, and I need to go find where the professor was talking about that. Then you can go back and look where the instructor was talking about that. Or I need to understand how to measure angles in this particular carpentry thing. And if the students know the words to search for, those captions go right to the minute and second that you're talking about it in your lecture videos. So that's a wonderful way to give people better access. And Paul, you're saying something very similar to what I'm seeing in the chat too. Barry says offering choices in how adults would like to engage with guidance appointments. So by phone, Zoom, email. Siobhan says including relevant YouTube clips, screencasts, presentations, giving people an overview so that they can predict how they're going to spend their time. And we've got a lot of people saying things like that. How do we give information to our learners? Using apps that are suitable to the lesson and learners, giving learners your presentation and resources, video and PowerPoint, recording classes using things like Socrative. So the two things that I'll add to that are, in addition to giving people more than one way to get the information, give them more than one way to show what they know as well. If you're used to students doing a demonstration, could they do that demonstration via a recording and then share it with the class when you're all together instead of doing it right there in front of you? If you're asking students to write a paper or an essay or work through a process, is there a way that they could pretend that they're a news reporter and give that information as well? So I love the way that everybody is focusing on lowering those barriers, and whatever you came up with just now, notice how the sorts of barriers we're lowering with UDL are barriers to access. Access to the interaction, access to information, access to feedback. UDL is all about keeping the rigor and the challenge in your subject matter where they belong, high, but lowering access challenges.
Okay, so just like what we've done now, I think the UDL for a practitioner guideline also contains pause points after every story, after every segment of information, and after every how-to section, in order to give your readers a chance to step back. And maybe, Paul, when this gets out there a bit more and the unions and other groups kind of take part in this, they might also have that time to think about doing things differently. And things like maybe reflecting on your own practice. We all need to do that. And I know a lot of ideas and suggestions came up there in the recent discussion, but one of the things that was really useful is just asking the students. Sometimes just simply, some things cannot be technical, they can just be quite simple things that you can change for the students. Making a plan to strengthen your UDL practices can really grow your practice, and expanding beyond your own individual efforts by talking to your colleagues, reaching out to your colleagues and finding out, talking to them maybe informally or formally about what they're doing and how they're dealing with particular situations that are coming up. So this all leads us into how we can spread the word about two very important ideas: inclusion as a community, and also broadening accessibility for everyone without removing the needed supports.
And on your screen now is a screenshot of the ahead.ie website, where we have a resource hub for the book. So we've got lots of resources that go beyond just the guidance in the book. A key part of the project was the creation of this resource hub with examples, references, and ideas that go beyond what's in that guidance document. Because the book purposefully simplifies universal design for learning to allow everyone in FET to take a step zero, if you will, the Resource Hub is your next step to expand your work, your networks, and your interactions. The Resource Hub also expands your community, placing you in touch with people from around Ireland and around the world.
Okay, so UDL, it's as we learned earlier, there's lots of really excellent examples in every ETB and around the country. But what we want to do is to have a more consistent approach. And it takes everybody that works in the centre, the teachers, the counsellors, the directors, everybody, if we're going to reach a more consistent level of UDL. So we need to think of UDL and inclusion as a means of creating connections with other people and with the community. And your role as an educational professional, you are very well positioned to know your colleagues and which of them, and there's huge commitment in the sector to inclusion and diversity and to lowering barriers for your students and to give them the best opportunity. So look for your colleagues, create either formally or informally discussions and talks which have different perspectives. It doesn't always have to be people doing the same subject as you. It could be people maybe coming from different programs, different subject areas, different levels in the organization. But people who are committed to improving the experience of the learner, and people who want to change and who are happy to take part in a professional network and to work on it, to share their ideas and to, talk about challenges that maybe you're all facing and finding solutions to problems, because this is a solution-based. So what we're going to do now is, as part of this research for the guidance, which was driven by the stories of people who are creative and working hard in the sector, we visited the centres around the country and we interviewed many people, especially those involved in various professional networks. So we're very grateful to our FET colleagues whose stories featured in the book, Helena Carroll and Carrie Archer. Helena, can I talk to you first of all? So what effect did your work with the AIN professional learning work have for you and your learners?
Well, first of all, thanks a million for inviting me to speak today, and I'm delighted, and it's great, it's energizing, at that kind of midway point of the holidays. Being part of the network, for me, it was brilliant because you got to share common experiences, common issues that you as practitioners would be coming up against, and realizing that you weren't alone was basically the big thing for me. And especially sometimes, I kind of came into FET, I'm not in it that long, and when you get to meet you think your own problems are unique, and then you come into a network and you realize actually they're quite similar. and brainstorming and sharing ideas, just like what's been done in the chat channel today, was just, it was an amazing experience to be part of that, and to realize that, you know, there isn't just one way of doing things. There is always loads of different ways to do things, to be creative, to realize that you do have freedom to actually try out things, to experiment. And that would be my big advice to people is, you know, and I was delighted actually, I think Tom mentioned it there as well, that it isn't just one way of practicing UDL. There's also other ways of doing the assessment for the learners and engaging the learners. So we can teach in different ways, but we can also assess in different ways. And I think that was a real game changer for me. And it was a game changer for the students as well, because when, you know, they get very tired of all the written work, and when they realize they can present it in a different format and do it in a different way, that is really changes things for just the teacher and the student as well.
Yes, it's interesting, Helena, what you say about that people actually kind of need permission in a way to start doing things differently. And once you say, yes, well, it's okay, particularly with assessment, they can be highly creative and still reach the standards and help students to reach the learning objectives. But I think people can look at those learning objectives and think, oh, we have to do this. And
yes,
slight change, yeah, it makes a huge difference. Yeah. Thanks, Helena. Carrie, what was your biggest piece of advice for everybody in the webinar today?
Yeah, I think for me, I think sometimes we can jump straight into the action and expression and how am I going to change an assessment? And for me, it's actually around the first guideline around the multiple means of expression. So this whole idea, I'm a huge advocate for how you build relationships with people. So one of the big parts of UDL is about encouraging and supporting and empowering our students to be self-advocates, to self-regulate, to be autonomous learners. But if we want them to be able to do that, and we really want to give them options for recruiting their interest, we have to create really safe spaces for them to be able to do that and for them to feel like they genuinely have a voice. So to be able to do that, you know, you said earlier on about inclusion being part of a community. So this is also about our learners being part of a community, and it's about bringing together, you know, this diversity. So we've got students from different genders, different religions, different ethnical backgrounds, different cultural diversity, sexual orientation, students who have left mainstream education. It's about bringing all of those voices to the table and actually giving them a space where they feel safe, they feel appreciated, and they feel valued. And a key part of that, like two of our greatest needs are, we want to be unique, right? So we want to stand out, but we want to belong and we want to fit in. So creating that space through how we provide students with different ways to engage, to me, is really, really important. And we have to be able to balance those things. So for me, I think going in with that piece and the relational piece, the community with your learners, and if you want to really inclusify and to bring people on board, then you have to show them that they're leaders and that they're guides in how we're learning as teachers as well, and maybe being that bit vulnerable and involving and including the students in what we need to do to improve. And I think that for me is one of the big things that I've definitely learned through UDL, is that piece to me is really important. So we have to act and listen, and ask students questions, and then we have to do something about it. It's not enough just to let them have a voice.
Yeah, no, thanks, Carrie. I think relationships is a really strong feature of FET. I think the relationship between you know, particularly the teachers and the students is a big strength of the FET sector. But I suppose there is a jump then in actually handing over and nearly making and supporting students to nearly be co-creators of what they're doing. You know, obviously they have to reach certain standards, but how they get there can be so different. And you cannot be just asking them, but listening to them and hearing what they're saying and making sure that then goes back into whatever design, however you're designing the materials of the course or the task. So yeah, no, thank you both. I mean, I think that was really excellent. Thank you.
Fantastic. And thank you, Helena and Carrie, for sharing your ideas. Now, everybody on the webinar and everybody who's watching the recording later, now that you've heard more about the UDL model from people who've actually done it, we'd love to continue the conversation. We have about 20 more minutes left, and we wanted to make sure that we had some space to open it up for a town hall format where we'll answer any questions that you've got, little ones about practical things and big ones about philosophies and anything in between. So what will you take away from our time together? On your screen, there's an instructor pointing to a blackboard. There are some learners from various different situations, and they're all asking the same question. They say, why does this matter to me? And in our open conversation, what's one thing that you want to try? What's one thing that you already doing and we've shown that it's important, or one question that you still have? All of our panelists will be here to answer questions, as well as our colleagues from Ahead Ireland who are there in the background as well. And let's make this into a conversation. So please either use that raise hand feature and we'll recognize you and bring you on the microphone, or we can, we can use the chat feature, or we can just take some notes and do things that way. And forgive me, I was scrolling through a bunch of different things to get to the controls here. So let's open it up. Does anybody want to come onto the live microphone, perhaps?
Just what people are thinking there, Tom. And just for people who are kind of new in the room to UDL, I think it's important to say that this is a framework that's internationally recognized, that it's evidence-based, based in neuroscience and the learning sciences. And what makes it really, really valuable framework for FET is that it's already used in a huge variety of educational settings across the world. And that's where I suppose one of the big learnings for me when we went out and started to do this work, visiting the site centers at the various centers, collecting the various case studies, is that we already got great examples of it happening across the huge variety of FET programs that were out there. So it's not something that's theoretical. This is something that's already happening live. And then I might, if it's okay, is it a cheat for me to begin and ask the first question?
Go for it.
I'd love to ask a question of Helena and Carrie if they were still there, because I think that piece around that Carrie was raising about the sort of safe spaces for learners to come in and feel valued and feel part of the community, and therefore build their confidence and feel they're able to kind of contribute and shape the direction of these things is really important. I know, like Helena's example actually within the guidance is really focused all around that. So I wonder if you could maybe give us your own thoughts on a very practical step that people could take, you know, something simple that they could do maybe in the next time they have a class with their learners, when they you know, are introducing new learners to a program, for example.
Well, from my point of view, the one thing that I have done from the get-go is that I've told my students about UDL. So at the induction point, I have told them that, you know, this is the kind of style of the way it's going to be done, that it's really inclusive, that, you know, as Carrie says, it's not just their voice matters, but it's the action behind it as well, that if they're going to give me feedback on maybe the way they'd like things to be done, that's going to be taken into account and it's in a safe space. But I have found doing that, as I hate using the word maybe game changer, but I've definitely found with students, they have been far more responsive when they understand the kind of intent behind it. And they see that, oh God, this is not just going to be kind of the traditional classroom environment where I sit up there and or stand there and pontificate, that, you know, that they're going to be in this very shared experience. And like, as Carrie mentioned, we've so many different diverse students coming from so many different backgrounds who may have had experiences, mature or learners, very negative experience of education, that really then they're going, oh, this is different and this is interesting and I kind of want to be part of this. So definitely for me, at induction, just very simple, explain it and tell them what it's about, and just kind of listen to them, see their reaction and take that in.
I thought as well, I saw an absolutely fantastic, I'm not teaching at the moment, but I saw a brilliant example in one of our colleges, Collage de Dulig, where their a group of the teachers were doing the UDL badge, And what they did was they taught their students about UDL, but then they got their students to think about how they would then incorporate UDL into their practice when they go on to work placements and they're working in a social care environment. And then they also got the students to teach other teachers about UDL. Like, that's properly engaging your students and making them co-partners and co-creators and giving them voice. And they had a student who both had a visual impairment and had dyslexia. And I mean, it transformed the way that she engaged. She did a piece with us with QQI about talking about her experience of that, but it made her think about how she was going to use UDL in her practice. So not just as a learner, but as you know, a practitioner when she went into a social care. And I absolutely loved that. I thought that was amazing.
Fantastic. And there's a follow-on question here from Sarah, and we have another one from Sophia coming up. Sarah asks, what would you advise should be the first step in commencing the UDL journey in an ETB? And I can maybe talk about the individual one, and then I'd love to throw it back to Carrie and Helena, who've done the professional learning networks work on that as well. For yourself, start small. Identify a place where things aren't going the way that you had planned fairly regularly, right? Where in the interactions with your learners, do they always ask you the same question by email 700 times because they just didn't quite get it and they need that boost as collectively as a group? Or where, when they do the test or the quiz or the demonstration, you end up having to reteach that particular concept because they all kind of miss it? Where do they say, oh yeah, that was a really wonderful lesson and I still don't get it. Can you tell it to me a different way? Those are places where if you're doing a little inclusive design work, you're actually doing work that makes things a little smoother for your students, but also saves you time and effort down the line. And where you start small like that, and then you start comparing notes with your colleagues about the individual little things you're doing, that creates that sense of working together with your learners and with each other in the ETB. And here I definitely want to hear from Carrie and Helena, because you folks took it that step further and made those professional learning networks, right?
We're both being polite there, not wanting to jump ahead of the other one and saying about our professional learning networks. But we had the piece I spoke about in the guidance was a professional learning network that we had for specifically for support teachers. But since the guidance came out, so we've put a number of different communities of practice in place in our ETB, but one of them specifically now is UDL. And it has taken, so anybody who did the badge last year, so we'd 79 people who did the badge in City of Dublin, 36 went on to do the facilitators badge. So they were all given the option to join our Teams platform and to come in that way. And what we're doing then is having meetings. We'll probably have them every month to 6 weeks. It's agreed by the group. But that is where, when people come together and they're talking about how am I going to do this, you start with your own class, absolutely, and your one piece. But then it's about those conversations. When stuff starts to shift with the students start having conversations themselves and asking questions of other teachers. And I found that with loads of different things. When the students start going, but they're using Kahoot down the hall, or, you know, there's a Mentimeter going on and I'm able to use that, like, why are we not doing that? Then it does create a little bit of a shift. But I think having the support of your colleagues is so important. And then you do have to take it that one step further, and you do have to start having conversations with maybe your quality team. So in City of Dublin, we have quality teams in every centre and in every college, having conversations with them around the assessment piece, getting to make sure that your externs are on board with what you're doing. And then that kind of gives a little bit of confidence. And people at management level and at senior leadership level need to understand what it is and what the impact is for the learners. And I think that that's through the student voice piece. So while you need to start small and have the support of your colleagues, you do definitely need to have that. It has to be both. It has to be bottom up, but you need the top down support, and your senior leadership team and senior management, they need to understand what the potential benefits are here for all of our students.
Oh, Carrie, I think you just said it for me. I'll just bow out there now. Yeah, I think the big thing is be brave, be bold, or go home, you know. You're just going to maybe sometimes have to be a bit of a maverick on it and, you know, take a chance. And like, because I do agree totally with what Carrie is saying, you know, you get the whole thing about, oh, what will quality assurance say? What will, you know, extern? And, you know, during the pandemic, you know, I took a little bit of a bold move, and instead of getting the students to write out learner records and assessment because they were getting demented from writing it, we just actually did group work and we workshopped the learning outcomes that way. And the feedback from the extern was that she was so tired of reading written stuff that she was delighted to see something being done in a different way. So, you know, I think you just sometimes have to take a chance, and you have to, you know, while the little steps might be small, you do need to as well to push the boat a little bit, and other people will follow when they see you doing that. And the students as well, like that, will, you know, it's like what Carrie said, if they see someone using Kahoot, well, why aren't we using it? So, you know, but that's what I would say, be brave.
And can I say as well there, Helena, that I think with the Corp workshop, and Carrie, what you said about senior management support is critical, because I think in Corp this, you know, you can have informal meetings and everybody meet their colleagues in the coffee room or have formal meetings, but at some stage people kind of think, oh, this, I'm putting a lot of time into this. But where the senior manager endorses it and are seen to endorse it and give it credibility, I think then people feel, you know, okay, this is something that is worthwhile, and have the support of senior managers where strategically we're going, so they can see the value of it more, and it's, I think it's more sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
That top down approach.
And I kind of find as well, UDL can't be boxed in. It's not something, you know, you were saying, it's not prescriptive in one way. And that's why it's very hard for maybe, you know, people from a management or a QA, because they like things maybe to be a bit prescriptive, when in actual fact, UDL is probably the exact opposite. And that does challenge then people.
So it's about standards rather than standardization.
And that's an excellent entree into one of the other questions that we brought in. Sophia is asking if we could talk about the differences between UDL in FET and UDL in higher education. In the United States, we have the college and university system, and then we have the community and technical college system, which is a similar division between higher education and FET in Ireland. And it's exactly what Helena just mentioned, that in the higher education system, there's this focus on, here are the standards, and you've got to make sure that, you know, everything sort of falls neatly into a box. And UDL is an approach. It's not a set of specific techniques that you do. It's a way of thinking. It is a mindset about the interactions that happen with our learners and materials and each other and us and support staffers and the wider world. So in higher education, I actually wrote a book about UDL in higher education, and the focus there is a lot more on sort of prescriptive standards and structures, whereas in FET, community college, technical colleges, this gets us back to the very roots of a universal design for learning. Many people confuse UDL with tech enhanced education, and technology isn't actually necessary for universal design for learning at all. You can do no tech UDL in a classroom. And so for those of us who teach in carpentry and cosmetology and health careers and all those other places, we're working with learners who are doing practical tasks, who are sort of getting their hands dirty and doing the things. And there's also that intellectual component to it, and being able to marry the two of those. We've got a bunch of stories in the book about that. That's a little bit different from in higher education, and it takes us back to the roots of UDL. And there's one other question that we have here as well. Michelle Naughton is asking, is there any comparison from the practice of universal design for learning and that of differentiated instruction, or DI? Anne, Carrie, Helena, is this in your wheelhouse?
Yeah, I might come in. Actually, I read an article on the way home from from Wexford in the car that Margaret Flood had just written about, looking at the idea of UDL, that it's so big in FET and so big in HE, yet practically absent in the post-primary sector. And she was looking at that idea of differentiation in comparison to UDL in that article. And differentiation really is about, you've got your lesson plan. And now, what are you going to change for the two students who have dyslexia? And what are you going to change for the student who has ADHD? And what are you going to change for the student who, is gifted? And that's differentiation. So it's taking your plan and then putting 2 or 3 different things in for the different students, specifically for them. UDL is about having a plan that incorporates how everybody is going to be able to learn and engage and interact and act and express themselves differently. And it's not about retrofitting the thing that you put in place for the 20 students and you now need to change different things. And the difficulty is that in initial teacher education, we're not looking at UDL. So we're looking at what you do for the mainstream, and then how do you adapt that for a couple of students. And unfortunately, that's the model that we have in place at the moment. But the more people who know about UDL, like people saying now, how do we change it at post-primary? So then it's coming through. It's actually much better in Ireland in the primary sector. And then it kind of disappears a little bit in post-primary, and then we bring it in. But that's what the difference between differentiation and UDL is.
Fantastic. And that's a really good note on which to wrap up our launch town hall here. So I'm going to turn it back over to Anne. She has some closing remarks, and then we'll turn it over to Dara, who has some exciting announcements about some next steps that everyone can take.
I just want to thank you all so much for coming along and for all your ideas and your questions and your enthusiasm, and particularly to Carrie and Heelan, who I think made a huge contribution to the sector and to the session, and made it very real. So I think check your AHEAD website at ahead.ie to see the UDL for Practitioners guidance and resource hub, which I think has lots more materials and ideas in it. And please let us know how you use it, how you adapt it, and how you expand it beyond your own practices, because that's how we learn as well, by hearing your ideas and what you're doing with it. So thanks to all our sponsors and colleagues who made this book available and the resource collection. So thanks to all of you for being our UDL evangelists, as you share ideas with your colleagues about how to lower barriers for all of the FET learners. So thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks very much. Yeah, so I suppose the call to action is to go read the guidance, speak to your colleagues about it, start a community of practice. Even a book club based around the guidance is a great low-key way to start, and a great fun way to start. Start small, but definitely get started. So you can begin implementing UDL using the +1 approach the very next time you teach. And once you start, I guarantee you'll get hooked and you'll want to do more.